Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am very happy to bring you some useful information to know. If you love music, it'll be very, very useful for you. And if you like romantic music, it'll be particularly interesting for you. On January 24th, at 2 p.m. New York time, there will be a concert devoted to the piano works of Serhiy Bortkevych, or in Ukrainian, Serhiy Bortkevych. He was a composer born in Ukraine of Polish ancestry who was raised near Kharkiv at the time when Ukraine was either known as Little Russia or as simply Russia, Russian province, because it was part of the Russian Empire. Bortkewicz's parents came to Kharkiv, settled in a small town nearby, and they were actually, I believe, of some noble family, Polish noble family, and they started business there. And Serhiy was born there. His story is incredibly interesting in a sense that he was born in 1877 and died in Vienna in 1952. In between, he and his wife and his families had to deal with World War I and then World War II. There should be a film made of his life because it was that, in a way, tragic, that difficult. But nevertheless, he survived it very, very well. Now, this music will be performed by a wonderful young pianist from Ukraine who got interested in Bortkewicz's music a few years back. Well, he'll tell us in a minute how far. And who's a wonderful pianist, as I said, and has the right sound, the right temperament, the right everything to make this music live. So, Pavlo Gintov, would you tell us a little bit about your interest in Bortkewicz's music?
Oh, yes. First, I've heard his music, or of his music, back in 2016. Believe it or not, I'm a musician from Kyiv, from Ukraine, and I studied professionally there, and I never heard his name mentioned, and I never heard his works performed while I was studying in Ukraine. And that is one of that's the main question, why his music was unknown and was forgotten for so long. It has something to do with politics and the tragic events of the first half of the 20th century, but we'll get there a little later. So first I encountered his music here in America, in New York, a few years ago. And the thing is, what I was doing, I was looking for a piece by a Ukrainian composer that somehow is related to Crimea. I wanted to build a program of works by the Ukrainian composers, and I already had a certain program in mind, but something was missing. Something that I really wanted to include is a piece that has something to do with Crimea. Because in my concerts, I like to talk about music and about composers. People like to learn about these composers they don't really know much about. And I usually tell them about the life and style of those composers, and also tell them a little bit about what's going on in Ukraine nowadays. So I really wanted something that is connected to Crimea, because Crimea is our everyday pain for many years, unfortunately, now already. So I was looking through different pieces, and I saw this cycle called Crimean Sketches by a composer whose last name looked Polish to me, Bortkiewicz, with this CZ in the end. So I thought, interesting, is there a Polish composer who wrote something about Crimea? And in my brain, I immediately thought of Adam Mickiewicz's Crimean Sonnets, a cycle of poetry by a great Polish poet, Adam Mickiewicz. And I thought, oh, wow, interesting, another there was a Polish poet, and now there is a Polish composer also writing about Crimea. So I opened that music, and from the first page, I was certain that this is exactly what I was looking for. It was truly magnificent, beautiful music, a true ode to the nature of Crimea. And I used to spend every summer in Crimea until I was about 16 years old. So for me, it was something truly amazing, brought back all the memories of the mountains and pine tree forests and the sea. And right away, I figured that I need to learn it and start playing it. But then I decided to look up this composer because I never heard of him before. And how embarrassed I was when I learned that he was in fact from Kharkiv. And he was a Ukrainian composer who was forgotten for many, many years. And his works were not played for a long time. And then after that, I started digging some more of his music and ended up recording a whole CD of his music because I was so inspired by it, and I really, really loved his style. So this is my story of getting to know Bortkiewicz.
Okay, at this point we should play a little bit of his music to entice for the audience that we hope will take part in it. So, what is the piece that you want to play a little bit of?
Another trademark of Bortkewicz's style is his very dramatic build-ups that lead to extremely powerful and ecstatic climaxes. Here's an example from his Consolation, from cycle Lamentations and Consolations.
Well, that was great. Now, obviously, this music sounds very 19th century in many ways. But he's not the only composer who's done that. There are many others, right?
Yes.
So there's Rachmaninoff, who's actually in many ways his contemporary. They just died so many years apart. And there is Sibelius. There's another Ukrainian called Kosenko that also wrote in that kind of a style. And there is even Strauss, Richard Strauss, also started out as a bad boy of music, but by the time modernism came in, and the 20th century is known very well for modernism, he was no longer a modernist in anybody's eyes, but was basically a throwback to the 19th century. So what's particularly about Bortkiewicz that you found so interesting that you want to learn to play it? And you've played a lot of them.
Yes, so when I just looked through his music for the first time, I didn't know when exactly he lived. So I thought it must be somewhere end of 19th century or something like that. And then, of course, when I was reading about it, I realized that he lived in the first half of the 20th century. And yes, his music does sound a lot like the 19th century romantic music. He was he had very conservative views on music. He liked music with beautiful melodies and a traditional harmony, major and minor harmony, and he really did not have too much appreciation for the modern music of his time, for the new Viennese school, for Schoenberg or Berg, for even for Ravel, or well, maybe for Debussy a little more, but still, he'll prefer those old 19th century romantics like Chopin, Schumann, Liszt, Mendelssohn, and also some of his contemporaries who were writing in, as you said, similar style, like Rachmaninoff or Scriabin, in particularly early Scriabin. I think he really loved his music. So it's fair to say that some of his music sounds a lot like, you can hear all these influences. One piece you can hear, oh, I hear Mendelssohn here. Another piece you can say, I hear some Scriabin here. So it's quite interesting how the range of his influences, but they all come from this tradition of the great romantic music. And having said that, I still think that he has his very unique style, his own style, because in these beautiful melodies that sound a little bit like all those romantic composers I mentioned, he still takes you to places where you don't expect to be. So he surprises you. He has this very different harmonic progressions that couldn't be any of those composers. His melodies are sometimes very long, almost like Wagnerian melodies, and also has very unexpected twists. Though when you listen to them, they sound quite standard, but then when you start analyzing them, you realize that what he does is actually, there is some magic, very special magic in what he does. It is not like anything else.
Good. And I think maybe when you play it for us, you might want to talk a little bit about some things like that. Actually illustrate some of these surprises that his music has. Would you do that?
Sure, let's do that.
That'll be great. Okay, so let's hear the next piece.